that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those solely observing in the room today, and I can see that there aren't any people solely observing, they may wish to know that the camera is angled away from them and the public gallery where you are sitting, so you will not be actually going out live on the television. A reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if your microphone is switched on. So it's very important that you remember to press the on button. Any mobile devices, please see that they are switched to silent or off. It's very disconcerting to have them ringing when somebody is speaking. We can now move to the main part of the meeting. And before we actually start the main part, can I introduce, for those people who are not familiar with everybody who is here, can I also ensure that everybody knows who everybody is? Mr. Panchai, I know you quite well, and I'm sure you know other people who are here. I can see somebody just arriving. Are you representing the petitioner? If you'd like to sit over there. Thank you. The councillors who will be actually passing judgment on what we are discussing this afternoon is Councillor Janet Gardner, Councillor Brian Stead, and myself, Councillor David Yarrow, who is the chairman of the meeting. Sitting on my immediate far left is Charlene Ellis, who is the licensing officer, John Pitt, who is the Democratic Services officer, who keeps me in order, and my legal advisor, difficult to pronounce, Bijal. So without further ado, we'll go into the first item on the agenda, which is, are there any apologies for absence?
No apologies received, Chairman.
Thank you. Have we any declarations of interest? I don't imagine there are any declarations today. I can confirm that all the items of business are in Part 1. Should at any time it be necessary to go into Part 2, I will say the words that we are going into Part 2, and that is for private business, and it is only for certain people who are in the room to listen to what's been said. Are there any matters that have been notified in advance or urgent? I have none. You have none? Okay. So let's get on with item 5, which is the application for the grant of a premises licence for the supermarket High Street Useley UB7 7DS. Charlene, if you could lead us into that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Just a moment.
Mr. Panchal has an application that we would have to hear first before we begin the application to defer.
I thought he was doing it after Charlene.
No, at the start, because if we're going to defer, then Charlene doesn't present the report.
My apologies. A slight change of plan. I understand that you have something to say before we commence the proceedings, Mr. Panchal.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, I have been instructed by the applicant that due to his ill health, he will not be able to attend today. There is a medical forms here, and I have no problems if the hearing goes ahead and if his non-attendance does not affect the result of if it's not taken into consideration when you're making your decision. If that is, if you're happy to have that as a decision, we would like to carry on. Otherwise, we prefer that this hearing be adjourned. That's what our is. If the client is required to attend.
Thank you, Mr. Panchai. My own personal view on the issue is that if you're happy to continue, I would also be happy to continue. The fact that the applicant is not here will in no way affect my judgment of the applicant. I understand he's in hospital, or he's certainly too ill to be able to attend this actual hearing. If he's happy with you, that you can put his case forward, or that you can answer the questions that might be asked of him, I'm happy to continue.
Chairman, I'm happy to continue from the instructions I've had from my client, as long as your decision does not affect his non-attendance. Again, I repeat that.
No, I certainly will not be drawing any negative inference from your client's for your car not being here. Whatever decision I and the rest of my team arrive at will be from what we have heard from you and from the others this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Charlene, can you enter me?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, committee members. You're invited today to consider a new premises licence application received in respect of an off-licence to be known as Supermarket. This will be at 88 to 90 High Street, Useley. The applicant is named as a Mr. Manmohan Singh Bajaj, and the acting agent on behalf of the client is Manpreet Kapoor of Personal Licence Courses Limited. The application is put before committee due to the receipt of a petition and 2 representations by interested parties, Councillor Peter Davis and a Mrs Segal, who I believe is represented today. The representations were put in due to concerns under the Licensing Act objectives, and all representations were received within the consultation period. The application is inclusive of trading times, Monday to Sunday, and the proposed steps to uphold the Licensing Act objectives can be viewed in full within Appendix 1 from page 25 to 37 of the pack. The aforementioned representations can be viewed in Appendices 2, 4 and 5. The application also attracted comment by way of representation from the Metropolitan Police, whereby conditions were put forth by the Police Enforcement Officer Ian Wares. However, these are detailed in Appendix 3 and were subsequently agreed to by the applicant, and the representation was later withdrawn. The area in which the premises is situated does have similar premises nearby, and I have indicated these on a site map displayed on page 59 and listed their trading times within your packs on page 23. For additional committee information, the premises has never previously been licensed under the Licensing Act and is currently undergoing refurbishment. A time frame for completion has not been given by the agent when I inquired. My recommendation is to grant the application in accordance with the conditions outlined in the proposed operating schedule in Appendix 1 and the conditions put forward by the Metropolitan Police in Appendix 3. I submit this report for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Panchai, would you put the case for your client?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I hope you can hear me. Is this? Yeah, thank you. Chairman, I will just briefly tell you the history of my client. My client has run an off-license in the past for 1 year in East London on Commercial Road. Prior to that, he has run a business in Southall for 6 to 7 years, not dealing with alcohol, but dealing with general goods. During that period, during his business period for the last 6 to 7 or 8 years, he has actually had no problems in any of the problems of any trading problems or that. Chairman, my client has also undergone a personal license course. He now holds a personal license for the last 2 years or 3 years. And Chairman, this is a business that he is buying in that area. This is a completely new shop which is going to be refurbished. It's quite a large shop, although there is competition around the area, and he has considered and looked at everything. And you can see from your bundle report on page 43 regarding the police looking into the objections of the antisocial behavior for the street drinkers. He has agreed to all the conditions brought in by the police, so he's trying to be cooperative and trying to make sure the 4 licensing objectives are promoted, and he runs a business. This business is going to be, as you can see the drawings on page, the application, so that I can go through with you, on page 37 of your bundle. And if you look at that, Chairman, the shop is going to be providing grocery, going to be providing a lot of needs of the local people around the area, and alcohol is going to be 30% of the business. Not 70% of the other business will be more to do with general public usage material. Yes, he has got a lot of competition around the area. He is going to create employment, because this shop will require over 3 to 4 people to run at any one time. So he is going to be creating the employment in the area. He is going to be promoting the 4 licensing objectives to make sure and work along with the responsible authorities that you have seen that there are no responsible authorities who have objected. The police who objected, he has cooperated and asked for the conditions which you can see on the police's objection of page 43. Chairman. He is going to be having a training manual, which I have got it here. He is going to be having all the posters required by the Licensing Act. He is going to be having a poster on the place, and if you would like to... So there is a operating schedule will be put up. There will be an incident book at the premises. There will be a refusal book at the premises, and there will also be a training. Staff will be regularly trained. Local staff will be employed in the area, Chairman. And I looked at the objections brought in by the petition, and I'd like to point out, Chairman, the objections in your bundle. Page 39. And looking at the objections, it's more to do with need, and need is not something that the Licensing Act would be looking at. And but again, we are happy to work along with the community. He's happy to work along with the community in the area. And as yet, he hasn't sold any alcohol, or he hasn't sold any, there is no history that he would create an underage sales, or he's created underage sales. And we are all aware that if that has been done, my client would be brought back again in front of the committee, and his license could be reviewed. So presently, Chairman, he hasn't traded, so there is no history of trade at the moment. And I feel, Chairman, that this license be granted.
Thank you, Mr. Panchayat. Could you just confirm that we just have an email which basically says I agree and that we will adjust our operating schedule accordingly so it meets the proposed conditions offered by the Metropolitan Police. Could you just look at page 43 and confirm to me that items 1, 2, 3 and 4 is what you were referring to, that those were the modifications the police wished to have inserted into your operation plan?
Yes, Chairman, that's the conditions that we have agreed with the police in our email.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Janet, any observations? I'm going to do it first.
I wonder if you can tell me, is there any particular reason for wanting to be able to sell alcohol at 6 o'clock in the morning?
Sorry, Councillor, there is no need to sell alcohol at 6 o'clock in the morning, because the shop is opening at 6 o'clock in the morning, and because of the size of the shop and the big, there are going to be shutters provided on the fridges, and if there is an hours to be reduced in the mornings, my client is very happy to consider those. But the shop is going to open at 6 o'clock in the morning.
So what you're saying is that your client wouldn't mind the actual alcohol selling hours being changed in the morning?
Yes, Chairman. If they're changed to 9 o'clock in the morning, we are happy to amend that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panchayat. That's very, very interesting. I've made a note of that, and it's a valid point. That score. Can we now go over to the petition? I understand that you are standing in for the person who raised the petition. Can you give us your name, please?
Yes, Manpreet Lacha.
Where's that? Okay, Manpreet, if you can tell us your views regarding the petition and regarding anything that Mr. Panchayat said.
Well, I'm just looking at this site map where it indicates on page 59, where it indicates all the off licenses. I don't think this is exact. there's a few more off licenses which haven't been listed. And one example is number 5 to 7, JK Food and Wines, who also sell alcohol, which is literally not even 50 metres from the proposed new site.
What page is that map on you're looking at?
59. That's correct. There's actually 3 off licenses on Fairfield Road.
Is that the beginning stage where you just mentioned?
One's further down, one's opposite number 6, which is highlighted in blue. So number 5 to 7, that's also an off license. And further down as well, there's also another off license there as well. There's also another off license at number 57 High Street. Which also hasn't been highlighted. I think there's a couple of more, but your map's a bit too small. Yeah, well, there's many more takeaways. Oh yeah, that's the indication, I understand. Yes, yes.
I don't think we need to know exactly who they are or what they are, but clearly there are more dotted around the area than might be led to believe just by looking at this.
Correct.
Okay. Continue.
Number 2, the proposal of another off license is not a need of the community, especially due to the antisocial behaviour in the local area. The amount of times the police have been called out in alcohol-related incidents, underage drinkers, which is the highest, noting that there was I'm not remembering the name, there was an area sectioned off in the Useley area for teenagers hanging around, drinking, and causing nuisance. A few incidents of windows being smashed, fights, bottles, also weapons as well. As I've been there for 9 years, I've seen this all happen. So I'm not sure how another off license will help.
Can I just give you 2 very quick answers to that?
Sure.
One is a question and one is an answer. That you said that need, it's not needed in the area. Unfortunately, this committee can't look at need.
Okay.
Need is not a licensing decision.
Okay.
Right? And you said you've been there for 9 years.
Yes.
But I haven't seen any petitions or any objections to the other licensing places that are already open that's causing all these disturbances and gang fights. Have you got any comment to pass on that? We're getting a petition now because another one's opening.
Yes.
But what about the past?
It's slowly been increasing. Yeah, it's been increasing slowly and slowly every time. And I think just by adding another off license is only going to create more problems, especially with the underage drinking, antisocial behaviour. It's more resources from the police is going to be needed, especially with the youngsters getting older people to buy alcohol for them and then drinking in the streets. It's a big problem, a huge problem in the Useley area. I'm sure if the Metropolitan Police was here, they'd also comment on that.
The Metropolitan Police have had plenty of time to comment on it, and their comments are that we don't have any objections to this particular shop opening, providing that they agree to take on board 4 extra suggestions, which we believe will cut down any of the worries that the petitioners have. And that's what Mr. Panchai has said, those conditions 1 to 4 will be incorporated into the licence. It is a very difficult decision to arrive at when the shop has not traded yet. I mean, all these things become a little supposition. You're quite right to bring a petition with what you think might happen, but we don't know that it is going to happen. What we are here to do is to try and ensure that we put enough actions in place within the shop that it doesn't happen. Now, it might happen in some of the other shops, I don't know, but they've been licensed before we got to this one. I've got to ensure that we've put enough activity into the shop, and before it opens, that will calm your fears, that it won't happen from those shops. I mean, are there specific shops that you believe that are causing this, or is it just a general trend in the whole area?
Not the whole area, in that vicinity of Useley, which is not very big. Around that area, there was, what do they call it again? I can't remember the name. When they section off an area for people... A dispersal area. That's it, a dispersal zone. It's been created by the police because of the fact of people, youngsters especially, drinking, hanging around those areas, mainly around that area, around the KFC, which is basically a few doors down from the proposed site, and around the corner near on Fairfield Road, and at the park at the back end, of youngsters drinking, causing trouble, smashing windows, fights with weapons. I'm not sure the measures of CCTV cameras and shutters is going to stop this from happening within the shop. I think by creating another off license, especially in such a small area with so many off licenses, to create another off license is going to help.
Need is not going to be an issue. Need.
Okay, yeah, I understand, but it's the trouble which I think may be caused.
Okay, can I just bring in Councillor, and you may have, I know you may have something to add to what the gentleman has been saying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't repeat some of the things my friend next to me has said. That particular part of Useley has been the subject of quite a lot of discussion with the police and with the antisocial behaviour unit, particularly Fairfield Road and that particular part of the High Street. We've had quite a few discussions about additional CCTV cameras, some of which we've managed to obtain, some of which is sort of pushed to one side, we'll see how it turns out type of attitude. And this particular part of Useley is a particular problem. We do have a lot of antisocial behaviour. It's close to a school, and one of my main concerns about this particular proposal is the fact that it could potentially be open till 12 o'clock at night. And of course, so late at night is when I would imagine with the other supermarkets in the area, a lot of alcohol will be being sold, if you like, after supermarket hours. And so you're actually increasing the pressure on that particular part of Useley all the time. And the only other, without repeating what's been said before about the potential problems there, is the fact that within this petition is a large number of residents who've indicated their lack of support for this particular new venture. And, you know, when in excess of 50 people who live there, and with respect, the applicant doesn't actually live in the area, and he's not going to, when he locks his door at night, he's not going to be very concerned about what happens outside his shop, and potentially I accept that some of it is outside the scope of this particular committee, but it's easy to say, well, I don't live here, I don't care what goes on, but of course the residents there, and I represent the residents, I am concerned what their opinion is, and I've got in excess of 50 signatures telling me that they don't want this additional licensed premises, and I, as their councillor, I have to take notice of this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Here's how we get into the anomalous situations. You're quite right. It is not for this committee to decide how many off licences, how many fast food takeaways we should have in the High Street. It's are the 4 licensing objectives being adhered to that are set down. And I don't know if the 4 licensing objectives have been adhered to, because he's not actually started trading yet in order to prove the point. All I can look at is what has been set down to ensure that the shop obeys the 4 licensing objectives. But in order to do that, you have to try it out. I have some sympathy in well, why do we have to do that? Because that's the law, unfortunately. That's what we have to do. Sometimes the law might not appear to be right, but nevertheless we still have to obey it. I'm still a little concerned that you're using history about other off licences that are causing chaos and mayhem in Useley High Street, but they are still trading because there hasn't been any information coming from the residents to say we want them reviewing. We are fed up with what's going on. That has not happened.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think to some extent you are right, but I suppose the feature of an existing business is it sort of struggles on, and the licence tend to be automatically reviewed, and if you like, we take the view from, if you like, the other side of the fence, from the antisocial behaviour that occurs outside the shop rather than what actually occurs within the shop, or whether we allocate blame to the shops themselves, which, particularly if the shops, they are resident as well as trading within the area. I think apart from the addressing the antisocial issues, we tend to turn a blind eye to the actual licensing itself. And I would say that's probably fair comment, if I'm brutally honest. But I understand the concerns, but the situation with regard to the police, although I understand where they're coming from, they put down conditions, I actually have my doubts. And with the best will in the world, I have my doubts that they'll even be able to adhere to them, and some of them won't even be his fault. And as I said, it might not even be within the scope of this committee, because I think the problems could actually, as my friend here said, it could fall back to problems for the police, which weren't necessarily to do with the actual licensing issue. And the whole thing is a bit of a sort of chicken and egg type of situation, and you might well be bound by certain legalities, which I can't interfere with, and yet, if at the end of the day you do grant it, I'm going to have to say to my residents, very sorry, but you could have a whole lot more problems on your hand, and you're going to be ringing me more regularly, and I'm going to be telling the antisocial behaviour unit more, and it just makes me think that the law itself could do with reviewing in some way. But again, that's not your concern.
It's not my direct concern, but it's still a concern. Charlene, have we had any contact with ASB and to find out what their views on this were?
I can confirm I looked at all the 7 licensed premises that are listed in my report, and looked at the Onyx system, which is a report that ASBIT feed into. No complaints have been received or logged. The only complaints on there were about rats and rubbish. No, nothing to do with antisocial behaviour or anything that we could possibly link to licensed establishments. And the police within their representation have noted that it is a problem for people congregating outside in the high street. But again, is that something that we can put on this premises that isn't open? Obviously, that's for your consideration, but I just wanted to note that. Okay.
Thank you. That's most useful. Councillor, that is the problem. It's all down to has any members' inquiries been raised over the last 4 years regarding this issue? If those are there and logged in, then yes, what you say there is evidence to back it up. At the moment, we're not getting at that feedback. It may very well exist, but it's not at a level that has brought in the council's team of experts to look at it and see what we can do. Mr.
I find that quite untrue. Myself, must have, in the last couple of years, phoned the police on at least 40, 50 different occasions. I've had my window smashed by a 13-year-old who was highly drunk at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He was tasered on Fairfield Road by the police. So I find it hard to believe that you have no logs of a 13-year-old being tasered.
We would not have any logs of those because that's the police. The police would have the logs, and what the police have said is yes, it is an area of crime and disorder. But in order to stop it, we are recommending that they do these 4 other tasks that we've set them in order to ensure that it doesn't that it cuts it down. Now, the council would only keep records if a phone call is made to the council, which is the antisocial behaviour. And clearly, it is antisocial behaviour. You've done the right thing, you called the police, but the council does not have access to those details.
I've contacted my local councillor as well. And I've informed my local councillor. Mr. Sharia? Yes. Okay. Yes, I've also contacted him as well.
Well, I'm sure, Peter, you'll have a word with your colleague, because there should be, if it's a serious situation, there should be an ME raised on it, and then we all have the facts in front of us when it comes to situations like this. Can you turn the mic off if you've finished? And have you genuinely finished, or do you want to continue with other things? You've said your piece. You've made a good case. Unfortunately, on a lot of what's been said, I can't take it, or we can't take it totally into consideration. I hear what you're saying, as I'm sure Mr. Panchai hears what you're saying. I would think that what would be a good idea is that when the applicant gets out of hospital, or when he's about to open, that he enters some kind of discussions with the people in the area to try and ensure that they are all happy with what's going on. I'm just been pointed out that I use the word when the licence opens, which means I'm predetermining. That's the wrong word to use. It's the right word, but the wrong context. That should the licence be granted, and he starts to trade, that he opens up some form of dialogue with the residents, and that decision has not yet been reached. Because at the moment we're working on times. I'm interested in the fact that you said that you wouldn't be averse to 9 a.m. start in the morning for licensable activities. What about the school situation, where clearly it is opposite a school? Children are going to be coming out about 3 o'clock. I think that you might need to have more staff on at 3 o'clock to ensure that children don't go in to the school into the shop to buy alcohol, should the licence be granted.
Yes, Chairman, we have looked into that aspect, and if you look at police recommendation of number 1,
okay, I can say it's just been pointed out to me that one of the additions the police wanted to put in was that it was 4 people, it's now 6. Six conditions, sorry. Oh, 6 conditions. Over the page, yes. Okay, there are 6 conditions. Can you just confirm to me, I said 1, 2, 3, 4, it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you confirm that all 6 are the ones that we're talking about?
Yes, Chairman,
thank you.
All 6 of them.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, is it in order for my friend to ask you another question?
I have two concerns. If this licensing does go ahead, the closing time is at 12 o'clock. Everything closes at 11 at this present moment. Do you need another off-license to stay open till 12 o'clock?
What's the closing times of the nearby licensing establishment?
On page 23, the times are listed for the 7 that I've put on the map. If you want to have a look, a couple of those are midnight.
There are a couple of midnight.
Yeah.
Do we need another one at midnight as well? Can we reduce the hours?
Reduce the hours of the existing premises?
No, for the new one.
That's up to the committee to decide.
Could we reduce the hours of the closing as well as the opening?
We could. I'm going to just about to ask Mr. Panchai how he would feel about the closing hours being at 11 rather than 12.
Chairman, we are quite happy to do that, if that is going to stop We are going to be, I can assure you in my submission, I'm going to put it up. The client wants to work along with the neighbours in the vicinity, because that's where his business is going to be. So he is going to, as you said earlier, he is going to be liaising with people around. He is going to take the opinions of people, how he would need to run the business so he could increase his trade. And if that is what the people around the area wish to have at 11 o'clock, yes, my client is quite happy to adjust. And we are here being very open to you to say, yes, we want to work along. Because this is quite a big shop. It has got a high rental and rates for this shop. And to fulfill and to pay the rates, the client has to work along with the vicinity around it, and the client has to also make sure that all the licensing objectives are promoted, and to make sure that the area is more safer for the local community to be around.
Thank you, Mr. Panchai. Are you happy with that statement?
Yes, I am. One more thing. You've listed the 6 concerns that need to be met. If they're not met, then what would happen? And who would you report to?
Vijay, if you'd take that.
If a license is granted and as residents you find that they're not complying with the conditions on their license, including those 6 conditions, you could contact regulatory services with a view to bringing a review of the license. That's a formal process where the councillors sit again. They look at how the premises has been run and they say, do we need to change anything? Do we need to keep it the same? Alternatively, you could report it to Metropolitan Police or any of the responsible authorities you would have seen listed on this pack for them to consider, and they could, if you wouldn't be willing to bring the review, you could ask them if they would consider. There's no guarantee that they will, but if they find it serious enough, your information may assist them in their work.
I mean, even breaking one of the conditions would not be serious.
Yes.
Again, if you think it's serious enough, regulatory services is there, as are the Metropolitan Police Services. It's their conditions specifically. So we would look to compliance for all licensing conditions, and licensing officers do go out regularly to check that everything is being complied with.
Okay, thank you.
And on top of that, Mr. Panchai is obviously aware, and he made a reference to it in his opening remarks, that although they're not trading now, should the licence be granted, he knows, and the applicant knows, that they are obviously under review all the time. I mean, the checks are carried out, and that should anything go wrong, he said that he'll be back in front of a committee to find out what went wrong, and that the ultimate product is, if it continues, is that the licence gets revoked. Now, we don't want to go down that step. We want to be able to take interim steps that can ensure that the business keeps trading within the rules that we have applied. And I think I'm interested of the willingness that you've got to change your hours, both start and finishing times, in order to meet to meet the residents halfway, sort of thing.
Yes, Chairman. As I said earlier in my presentation, and as I'm saying again, that we're willing to work with the residents and that my client wants to work. It's in his own interest, because there's I mentioned high rates and rents to be paid. And if he doesn't work in the interest of the neighbours and that, he is not going to be able to pay the rates and rents. He will shut down anyway without even us bringing it to the review here. So it is in his interest that he makes sure all the conditions are abided by, and it's in his interest to work along with the residents and that. And that's hence we are here to say to you that yes, that's what we want to do. And if you feel, and if the residents feel that they want an hour less to comply and to rectify the incidents they are having in the past, which has got nothing to do with my client at the moment, we are quite happy to do that, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Vijay.
Mr. Panchal, we've heard concerns for the protection of children, and you've mentioned your client also has premises in East London and or Southall. On the occasions when he's not on the premises, one of the ways in which we'd look to protect sales being made to children would be that the sale of alcohol can only be made by personal license holders. Are you agreeable to that?
Can I just say that I did mention in my initial presentation that my clients had worked in an off license for 1 year. Had worked. He isn't working at the moment, and he had businesses prior to that for 6 to 7 in Southall. So presently he's not got any business. This is his business now. So he will be present, and I do agree. And I think if you look at the police's presentation, it does say that a personal license holder, one of the conditions. Yeah, but we are quite happy to have a personal license holder present all the time on the premises. Chairman, I'm quite happy to have that condition laid in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we've almost gone over into the debating time. We've sort of debated and heard presentations for everybody. I don't propose to have any further time whilst we all sum up. I think we've heard enough, unless anybody wishes to make any final speeches. I certainly don't have any. I would like to get on and make decisions now, and just double check that everybody's happy with that. Mr. Panchai, you're the...
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy. I do not wish to make... I think we've had enough of discussions.
Good.
And so we...
Can I ask you then that you adjourn to the foyer, and we will debate the issue. You turn off there, I'll do it. All right.